Hi, it's Rachel here. I haven't made a video for a very long time, so I think it's about time I did make one since there's something to talk about. And we're in level 4 lockdown here in New Zealand, so there's not much else to do, is there? Anyway, I've been wanting to talk about the convention for a wee while, especially the talk given by David Splain, his half-hour rant about apostates and not going anywhere near anything that's negative. Obviously there's a lot of negative media, especially in the United States, a lot of court cases that get reported on, and I wouldn't be surprised if there have been tens of thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses contacting the headquarters to find out what's going on, and they're probably sick of fielding calls from Jehovah's Witnesses about these court cases and settling out of court. David Splain went on quite a bit about settling out of court and why it was justified, and that Jesus virtually commanded them to settle out of court. So I think that's clearly been an issue that's been raised at headquarters, perhaps at the service desk, a lot of inquiries, and probably a lot of brothers and sisters becoming inactive and leaving because of these news reports that they're hearing. So David Splain's talk was very desperate and nonsensical, actually. I think the desperation is showing in their talks, that they're actually contradictory. They for example, David Splain's talk, he started out at the start of his talk saying that bad men, apostates had slipped into the congregation sneakily, basically to destroy the faith of brothers and sisters. So they were the rot within the congregation. And then at the very end of his talk, when he was trying to get Jehovah's Witnesses to stay away from the online forums and things, he was saying, you know the people in your congregation, you know they are wise, you know they have your best interests in mind, etc., etc. When he's already said that you can't trust everyone in the congregation because, bad men, apostates have snuck in. So he was kind of all over the place. His reasoning was crazy, and there's been quite a few really good videos made about it, like Lloyd's video, his rebuttal. So I'm sure anyone watching this video will have already seen that video. Anyway, so we clearly see the desperation in the governing body. Their talk, their delivery, their facial expressions, everything just absolutely reeked of desperation, trying to keep Jehovah's Witnesses away from hearing these bad reports that they're hearing. And Stephen Lett sort of went off on a similar tangent in his talk at the very end of the convention, where he talked about these enemies that Jehovah's Witnesses have. The enemies of, what did he say, inherited sin, Satan and the demons, and the world, the wicked world are all around them. And he said that the wicked world around us is trying to assimilate us into joining them in ungodly conduct. And his facial expression became very serious at that point, when normally it's, you know what it's like. He normally looks like a clown. Anyway, and I did wonder when he said that he might have been alluding to pressure on the organisation to cave in when it comes to their two-witness rule, which of course they adhere to because it's scriptural. So they won't budge on that. And we had a brother give a talk, maybe 2 or 3 years ago on JW Broadcasting about the two-witness rule, how they will never change our scriptural stance on the two-witness rule. Another thing that they seem unwilling to change their stance stance on is reporting knowledge that they have, this is the elders, reporting knowledge of child sexual abuse to the authorities. They seem to be digging their heels in about not doing that. It makes me think back to when Stephen Lett gave a talk back in 2015. It was a morning worship talk, and it was called Maintain the Oneness of the Spirit. And he had a little rant about apostates there. And you'll remember it when I read it. I'll just read a couple of sentences from what he said. Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organisation. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organisation is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? If anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it is Jehovah's organisation. Really? Well, I beg to differ. I think if you really were interested in protecting children, then you would be reporting the abuse. That's the most obvious thing, to report it to the ones who are trained and authorised to deal with such matters. But no, you stubbornly dig your heels in and refuse to do that. I can think of, they've done other things, I have to say, in the last few years, since the Australian Royal Commission. They have implemented some very small changes and clarifications. For one thing, they've made I don't know what you call it, put a statement on the website about the official scriptural position about child sexual abuse, and they produced that magazine back in May 2019, which informed Jehovah's Witnesses rank and file about what they can do when there's a child abuse allegation, and it actually puts in writing that it is the right of the victim and their guardians to report to the police or other authorities, whereas previously that was not in writing anywhere, and reporting to the authorities was discouraged. Some were even punished for doing it. So that's a relatively new change that's now in writing for Jehovah's Witnesses to refer to. But still, the statement, the position that they've put on the website is still not, it's misleading. It leads Jehovah's Witnesses to think that wherever there are mandatory reporting laws for clergy, amongst other people, that they will always report child sexual abuse. But that couldn't be further from the truth. What happens is that in those places where clergy are mandated to report, they refer to the clergy penitent privilege, which provides an exception if the knowledge was gained from confidential discussions as part of their church practice. Then they are not obligated to reveal those to the authorities. And so that's what the Jehovah's Witnesses, the governing body and the headquarters, instructs elders. When elders phone the legal department to find out whether they need to report to the authorities according to the law in their state or their country, they are told, if there is a clergy penitent privilege allowance there, then that's what they will use, and they won't report. And that's what happens. That's why the organisation is in so much hot water at the moment, especially in the United States, with all these different court cases that I can't keep up with. But on several occasions they have refused to turn over documents that they hold, the database that they hold about child sexual abuse allegations and confessions. They refuse to turn it over. So how can you be said to be protecting, doing everything you can to protect children more than anyone else, when you're not handing over the information to the ones authorised to handle these things? So it really is disgusting. What they have done, something that comes to mind that really irritated me at the time was a talk given at a convention. I think it was 2017. And I do have here we are. This is the kind of thing that the governing body does, what they have done to protect children. So our brother gave a talk called Safeguard Your Children from What is Evil. Basically, it was encouraging parents to consider the possibility that ahead of in the future their child could possibly be in a position where they would be abused by someone. So it was kind of a preemptive warning type of thing, what you can do with your children to prepare them. So it was putting the onus to stop children from being abused on the parents and the children. And this bit really annoyed me a lot. This is what the brother said. Parents, you are the first line of defence. Let's open our Bibles, please, to Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3. It tells us, the shrewd one sees the danger and conceals himself, but the inexperienced keep right on going and suffer the consequences. Yes, the shrewd person thinks ahead. They see the danger ahead of them and take appropriate actions. Parents, as shrewd ones, you are the first line of defence. You have the need to take all reasonable steps to protect your children from potential dangers, including the abuse we're mentioning. And one reason why this is critical is in the majority of cases, the perpetrator was someone that the child knew and trusted. And so as parents, as shrewd ones, while not being overly suspicious, we need to recognise potential dangers. I mean, that's good advice. However, all I could think about when I heard this, in my mind I could see like a road, a pathway ahead, and there's some great potholes in it, things that could stumble you. And the elders can see those potholes, but they let the congregation members just head down the path with their kids without pointing out the potholes, saying, look, be careful, there's someone there who's been accused or confessed of child sexual abuse, just stay away from... No. So I was just absolutely disgusted. So when it says parents must do all they can, well, they're not given the information to protect their children, are they? If they were given the information in the congregation, like who to watch out for, then they'd be able to protect their children better. So apparently these days the elders, if there is someone in the congregation who is established as abusing children, it's either there's been a confession or 2 witnesses or something, then the elders will tell family heads of young children. But I don't think that's enough. I think everyone in the congregation should know, and it's the responsibility of everyone in the congregation to protect children. But I don't know how many people have been in this situation where they've had a warning from the elders about somebody, and I'd be interested to know whether those family heads who have been informed, have they been permitted to tell their wives? If they tell other people in the congregation, will they be censured for that? Will they get in trouble? So I'd like to know. If anyone knows the answer, you can comment and tell me. Anyway, something else I thought would be interesting to look at here was from back in 2014. If you remember the Jose Lopez case, he was awarded $13.5 million, and he'd been abused by Gonzalo Campos, who was like a serial pedophile, basically, just absolutely appalling. But there was a high up watchtower official, considered an expert, that's Richard Ashe, who had to give a deposition and then appear in he was on the stand during the trial. And so this was in 2014, so not a long time ago, and he explained what the role of elders is when there's been wrongdoing in the congregation. And it was a very long court transcript for the deposition, like 200 or so pages, but there was some really interesting points which show that they are not, the organisation acknowledges that they are not trained, equipped or authorised to deal with crime, to deal with criminal matters, and child sexual abuse is a crime, and he even admitted that it is a crime. But I'll just read you some little points here. So he was being questioned by Erwin Zolkin for this deposition hearing, and he was being asked what the purpose of the judicial committee is and what the elders' role is in a judicial committee. And he basically said that the elders will do their best to spiritually restore that individual. He went on to say, we are not trained investigators, we are not psychologists, we are not psychiatrists, we are not doctors. We are trained to be spiritually good listeners. We are not, or he says, they are not authorised to go out and be spiritual policemen. So they don't go out and do an investigation, for example, like the local police department might. They're not trained that way. Their training is mentioned here at 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, just the scriptural training they receive. I'll emphasise again, they have not had any formal training in this, Mr. Zolkin. But again, we are not spiritual policemen. What they do outside the congregation setting, we have no ability to monitor or to control or to police. We're not scripturally authorised to do that. So isn't that interesting? He's made it quite a clear distinction, showing that I think there's a small video clip you can see on the revealnews.org website, where Trey Bundy did a very comprehensive investigation over years into the child sexual abuse in the organisation. And there's a little video clip of Richard Ashe, and he said this, where is it? He said, well, within the congregation, ours is a spiritual protection. We're talking about physical protection. That's up to the secular authorities to provide. So he's acknowledging that the elders don't have qualifications or training or any kind of expertise to deal with criminal matters, especially something so serious as child sexual abuse. And it's up to the secular authorities to provide protection for children. If we think back to what Stephen Lett earlier said, no one does more. Oh, how did he put it? He said, if anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it is Jehovah's organisation. So in that case, and they believe that it's up to the secular authorities to provide that protection, then why aren't they reporting it? If they really sincerely want to protect children from this horrific kind of abuse, then they must report it to the secular authorities. And I would argue that they are scripturally bound to report it to the secular authorities. We all are familiar with Romans chapter 13, and I will read you what it says there. Romans 13. Okay, so this is from the Silver Sword. Let every person be in subjection to the superior authorities, for there is no authority except by God. The existing authorities stand placed in their relative positions by God. Therefore, whoever opposes the authority has taken a stand against the arrangement of God. Those who have taken a stand against it will bring judgment against themselves. So perhaps this is what we're going to see in the near future. Judgment coming upon Jehovah's organisation because they've taken a stand against the authority that's been arranged by God. Verse 3, for those rulers are an object of fear, not to the good deed, but to the bad. Do you want to be free of fear of the authority? Keep doing good, and you will have praise from it. For it is God's minister to you for your good. But if you are doing what is bad, be in fear. Yes, Stephen Lett, you were talking about the worldly enemies. But if you are doing what is bad, be in fear, for it is not without purpose that it bears the sword. It is God's minister, an avenger to express wrath against the one practicing what is bad. So, governing body, I really think you need to reflect on these words and stop being so resistant to the superior authorities, the ones that God has authorised to deal with crime and wrongdoing, or what is bad. So you are actively resisting God's arrangement. So let the judgment come, I say. Yeah. So along those lines, I just want to point out that this Richard Ashe, who gave this deposition hearing, where basically he showed that elders were only interested in spiritual restoration of wrongdoers in the congregation, and they weren't trained to deal with investigating crime and stuff, and they're not psychologists. He actually quoted the scripture in Leviticus 5, I think it might be verse 1. It's so in context, Richard Ashe was explaining to Mr. Zolkin and the other lawyers there the purpose of like a judicial committee and stuff. And he said, so he was talking about the requirement for 2 witnesses. On the other hand, there's the scriptural precedent cited there in Deuteronomy, and also Jesus' words in Matthew, and again in Timothy's words, or Paul's words to Timothy, that out of the mouth of 2 witnesses a matter is firmly established. So he's talking about the importance of having 2 witnesses. And then he goes on to say, so if you have 2 witnesses to some act of wrongdoing, first they could approach the individual and prompt them to come to the elders, but if they don't, then the 2 witnesses would have the responsibility. For example, mentioned here in Leviticus 5, it says, if someone sins because he's heard a public call to testify and he is a witness, or has seen or learned about it, he does not report it, then he will answer for his error. So this gives the individual the opportunity to come forth, but if they don't, the witnesses of that wrongdoing would come to the elders and report the matter. So here it's talking about, obviously, in the nation of Israel, and Jehovah had authorized the judges that sat in the gates to hear legal cases, if you like. And it's saying that if somebody has knowledge about something, either a wrongdoing or someone being falsely accused or anything like that, if they've got any knowledge of anything, then they must report it to those ones in the gates. It doesn't say that they have to go around, like for example, if someone saw someone else steal some cows, it's not saying that that person needs to go around asking all his Israelite brothers, hey, I saw so-and-so pinching some cows, did you see anything? And going around trying to get another witness. No, he's supposed to just take what he knows, report it to the judges, and then wait on them if they may very well get other reports from other individuals. So really what it's saying here to do, to report to the authority that God has authorized, is what they're not, the governing body are not doing today, and they're not instructing elders to do that. So they sit on knowledge of abusers, and they're not taking it to the superior authorities that God has authorized as his, his minister to avenge his wrath or something like that. So they're actually going against the arrangement that is in the Bible. And you have to wonder why. Why are they doing this? It's so... They could easily introduce some new light saying that if any Christian has knowledge of any crime, serious wrongdoing, and child sexual abuse certainly falls in that category, then they must report it to the superior authorities, so the secular authorities that God has given that role of addressing them. So they could easily bring a new light saying that. They've made lots of laws about everything else. I think witnesses would accept that. I mean, it might be quite hard. I can imagine, you could feel quite torn if your child had been abused and you didn't want to put them through any more trauma. But at the same time, love of neighbour would dictate that you do something to protect other children as well. And perhaps we need to get rid of the stigma around child sexual abuse. I know it's a tricky one, but I don't think anything's going to get better until reporting starts happening. So anyway, I think that's about all I wanted to say about it. I just can't see why the governing body is taking this position that they are, unless they are trying to goad or will the governments to attack them, to make it look like their forecasts, their prophecies, predictions are coming true, because we know they cry out persecution all the time. So maybe that's what they're trying to do. Or another thing is, maybe if they were to release that database of information to the courts and it was to become public, maybe there's some names on that list that would truly shock the living daylights out of Jehovah's Witnesses and just shatter the organisation. You got to wonder, you really do. I just can't see why they are being so stubborn about it. Anyway, that's enough ramblings from me. I hope I made some sense, and I'll make another video not too far away, I suppose, because there's a few interesting things happening in New Zealand with our laws. But I guess as with anything to do with law changes that can take years, so it's going in the right direction anyway. Okay, bye bye.